Pam Bondi had two choices: walk away or fight back. She chose the one no one expected. The large conference room at the Tampa Convention Center was completely packed. Rows of reporters sat with their cameras ready, flashing bright lights as they clicked pictures. The air was filled with murmurs, people whispering to each other, waiting to see what would happen. Some stood at the back, arms crossed, faces tense. Pam Bondi stood behind the podium, as calm and polished as always. Her blonde hair was neatly styled, her outfit professional. But today something felt different. The topic she was about to speak on wasn't just another political issue. It was personal to many people in the room. She cleared her throat and adjusted the microphone. The words she was about to say had already been carefully planned, but before she could even get through her first sentence, a sharp voice cut through the air. Explain? We don't need explanations. We need help. All eyes snapped to the man who had spoken. He stood near the middle of the room, gripping the chair in front of him like he needed to hold himself back. He wasn't just any person in the crowd, he was a veteran. His cap, embroidered with the words Vietnam Veteran, was old and frayed at the edges, a symbol of years of service. His face was lined with deep wrinkles, the kind that only come from a lifetime of struggle and sacrifice. Bondi paused. Her lips pressed together in a thin, unreadable line. Security near the door stiffened, waiting for a signal. The reporters leaned forward, sensing something important was happening. The man's voice wavered slightly, but it wasn't weak. It carried weight, the kind of weight that only comes from years of being ignored. My name is James Mercer, he said, his voice firm. I served 24 years in the U.S. Army. 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. I came home expecting peace, but instead I found a new battle, the fight to get the care we were promised. Some people in the crowd nodded. Others muttered under their breath. The camera zoomed in, capturing the emotion on his face. The VA won't return calls. My buddies can't get the medical help they need. And now you're telling us there's not enough money? Bondi took a slow breath. Mr. Mercer, I respect your service. These decisions are. I don't need your respect. His voice was sharp and filled with frustration. I need my brothers to stop dying in hospital hallways because of paperwork and waiting lists. His voice cracked slightly, but he kept going. You politicians love shaking our hands during elections. But when we need help, suddenly there's no money. The room went completely silent. Even the reporters stopped typing. Bondi shifted her weight slightly. Her hands gripped the edges of the podium. The tension in the room was thick. Then she did something unexpected. She stepped away from the podium. It was just a small movement, but it made a big statement. She wasn't going to hide behind speeches. She looked directly at Mercer. You're right, she said, her voice steady but softer. We do too much talking. I want to hear from you. Right now. Tell me exactly what's happening to you and your fellow veterans. The crowd murmured. This wasn't the usual political talk. She wasn't dodging the question, she was asking for more. Mercer hesitated. He hadn't expected her to actually listen. He rubbed the stitching on his cap, thinking for a moment. Then he took a deep breath and spoke. I had a friend, Benjamin Carter. His voice was quieter now, but the weight of his words filled the room. A Marine. Served in Desert Storm. About a year ago he started having chest pain. Just small pains at first. He went to the VA. They told him it was stress. Gave him some ibuprofen and sent him home. The room stayed silent except for the soft clicks of cameras. Mercer swallowed hard. 2 months later he collapsed in his kitchen. His wife found him. It was a heart attack. Turns out it wasn't stress, it was a blocked artery. But because he was just another name on a waiting list, he didn't get the tests. Didn't get the surgery. And now he's gone. A sharp breath came from somewhere in the audience. Someone whispered, Jesus. Mercer's voice grew rougher. That's just one story. You want more? I got plenty. My buddy Frank, Vietnam vet. Lost his leg in '68. Last year he got an infection where his prosthetic leg fits. He went to the VA, but they made him wait 8 hours. By the time they saw him, the infection had spread. They had to take the rest of his leg. Now he's stuck in a nursing home. He used to be the strongest man I knew. Now he just sits in a chair all day wasting away. Bondi stayed quiet. She wasn't giving excuses. She was just listening. But her posture changed. She didn't look defensive anymore. Mercer shook his head. I'm not asking for pity. I just want to know, how did we get here? How did we go from being called heroes to being treated like burdens? His voice broke slightly on the last word. Bondi took a slow step forward. I don't have an easy answer, Mr. Mercer. And I won't pretend I do. Mercer crossed his arms. Then what are you going to do? Bondi didn't turn to her staff. She didn't check with her advisors. Instead, she did something that shocked everyone. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small notepad and flipped it open. I want names, she said. I want real cases, real people, real problems. And I want to take them straight to the people who can fix this. Mercer blinked like he wasn't sure if she was serious. You what? You said the system is broken. I want to see exactly where and how, she said. Give me real cases. Right now. The energy in the room shifted. People weren't just angry anymore. They were curious. Mercer studied her face, trying to figure out if this was just another political trick. Then slowly he nodded. Fine. I'll start with Benjamin Carter's widow. You want her number? Bondi held out her notepad. I do. The cameras clicked as Mercer wrote down the number. Bondi's fingers gripped the notepad tightly, as if she understood the weight of the names she was collecting. But this was only the beginning. Not everyone in the room believed she meant it. Some thought this was just another promise that would be forgotten by the next morning. The room still felt tense, but now something had changed. The frustration was still there, but it was mixed with something else. Hope. Pam Bondi looked down at the names she had written. They felt heavy. She looked back up. How many more? She asked. Mercer narrowed his eyes. What? You said you had plenty of stories, she said. How many more? His jaw tightened. You really want to know? She nodded. I wouldn't have asked otherwise. Mercer took a deep breath. His eyes moved across the room. More veterans stood up, ready to speak. This was far from over. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like someone was finally listening. A few people in the room whispered to each other. Some reporters were typing quickly on their phones, their fingers moving fast. Then, with a deep breath, he pulled out his notepad. It was small, old, and looked like it had been used a lot. The edges of the pages were bent, wrinkled from being shoved into a pocket too many times. He held it up and spoke, his voice lower now, more serious. This is a list of veterans in my town, he said. Men and women who deal with this system every single day. Some can't get a doctor's appointment. Some are stuck in paperwork battles they will never win. And some won't be around much longer if nothing changes. Bondi, standing across from him, reached out her hand. She wanted to take the notepad. But for a moment he hesitated. He wasn't sure if he trusted her. Not yet. But then he saw something in her face, something different, something unexpected. And so he handed it over. She flipped through the pages, reading quickly. Name after name. Next to some names there were short notes. Denied benefits. PTSD claim rejected. 18-month waitlist. No response from VA. She looked up at him. Are any of them here? Mercer frowned. What? I want to talk to them, she said. Right now. The crowd stirred. This wasn't normal. Politicians didn't do this. They usually just listened, nodded their heads and said, I'll look into it. They didn't ask for real-time conversations. They didn't want to be put on the spot. A few reporters exchanged glances. They were already thinking about what they would write. Mercer looked around the room. His hesitation was clear, not because he was scared, but because he just couldn't believe what was happening. Then a voice spoke up from the back of the room. I'm one of them. All eyes turned toward the woman standing near the exit. She looked to be in her late 50s. Her hair was a mix of black and gray, pulled into a loose ponytail. She wore a navy blue t-shirt, faded and worn, with an old army emblem barely visible on the front. Mercer straightened. Melissa. She stepped forward. Yeah. Bondi turned to face her directly. Tell me your story. Melissa folded her arms over her chest. She took a deep breath before speaking. I did 2 tours in Iraq, she said. I was honorably discharged. When I came home, my injuries didn't seem bad at first. But over the years they got worse. Her fingers gripped her arm tightly. I applied for disability benefits, she continued. They denied me. Said my injuries weren't from combat. She let out a bitter, short laugh. I appealed. That was 4 years ago. I haven't heard a thing since. Bondi didn't look away. She didn't flinch. Who's handling your case? She asked. Melissa let out another bitter laugh. That's the thing, no one. It got lost in the system. Twice. I had to start over. Twice. Her voice grew tighter. Meanwhile, I'm working 2 jobs just to pay for my medical bills. Mercer shook his head, muttering something under his breath. Bondi reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone and opened her contacts. She turned the screen toward Melissa. Give me your case number. Right now. Melissa blinked. What? I'm going to call the VA office, Bondi said. and I want them to explain to me in real time why your appeal has been sitting in their system for 4 years. A ripple of shock ran through the room. Reporters whispered to each other. Cameras zoomed in. Melissa hesitated. She glanced at Mercer. He gave her a small nod. She took a deep breath, then pulled out her wallet. She dug through a stack of folded papers and pulled out a battered form. That's my claim number. Bondi took it. She dialed a number and pressed the speakerphone button. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Veterans Affairs Office, Tampa Branch. This is Karen speaking. How can I help you? Bondi didn't waste any time. Karen, this is Pam Bondi. I'm standing here with Melissa Grant, a veteran whose appeal for disability benefits has been stuck in your system for 4 years. I want to know exactly what's going on. Silence. Then a nervous shuffle on the other end of the phone. I need to pull up her file, Karen said, her voice shaky. I'll wait, Bondi said firmly. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Every single person, journalists, aides, guests, stared at the phone waiting. There was a long pause, then the sound of typing. Bondi's expression didn't change. She stood still, holding the phone tightly. Melissa's fingers tightened around the edge of her t-shirt. More typing. Then Karen cleared her throat. Okay, I have the file here, she said, her voice nervous. It looks like Ms. Grant's claim was denied because there wasn't enough proof that her injuries were from combat. Then another pause. Bondi's voice remained calm but firm. Go on. Karen took a sharp breath. It looks like her appeal was marked for review in early 2021, but another pause. Then a quiet sigh. The case was, closed due to a clerical error. Melissa's face twisted in confusion. Wait, what? Mercer cursed under his breath. A few reporters glanced at each other, typing even faster. Bondi narrowed her eyes. You're telling me this woman's appeal was closed because of a mistake? And no one told her? Karen's voice got even smaller. It should have been refiled automatically. But I don't see any record of that happening. Melissa let out a short, bitter laugh. So what? I've been waiting for 4 years, over a mistake. Karen stammered. I don't. Bondi cut her off, her voice sharp now. Who is in charge of appeals at your office? Karen hesitated. That would be, Director Mason. But I want his number. A long silence. I don't think I can give. I was the Attorney General of this state, Karen, Bondi said. I know what you can and can't do. I'm asking for the direct contact of the person who can fix this. Karen swallowed. I can have him call you. No, Bondi said. I will call him. And while we're at it, I want this claim reopened today. Her words hit the room like a hammer. Melissa stared at her, still trying to process what just happened. Mercer crossed his arms and gave a small nod. I'll escalate the request, Karen said quickly. I'll send it over right now. Bondi nodded. Good. And I expect an update before the end of the day. Click. The call ended. The silence stretched. Then Melissa exhaled shakily, rubbing her face. I don't even know what to say. Mercer stepped forward, shaking his head in disbelief. I'll be damned. Bondi looked around the room, her voice clear. This isn't just about Melissa. This is about every veteran stuck in this mess. I want names. I want cases. And I will make sure they get handled. Melissa blinked at her. You actually mean that? Bondi met her gaze. I wouldn't be standing here if I didn't. The room buzzed with whispers. Journalists scribbled in their notebooks. Cameras captured every moment. This wasn't a planned speech. This wasn't a politician making empty promises. It was something real. Mercer let out a breath. If you actually do this, I'll admit I was wrong about you. Bondi didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. She just held out the notepad again. Then help me make sure it gets done. And outside that room, the internet was already on fire. Mercer was furious. Melissa's story was heartbreaking. And then something no one expected happened. Pam Bondi decided to step in and do something herself. Some people thought she was just putting on a show to make herself look good on TV. Others believed she really wanted to help. But no matter what anyone thought, one thing was clear. Everyone was talking about it. By that night, major news stations were running headlines about the event. Pam Bondi clashes with Mercer over veterans' case, then shocks everyone by calling the VA live on air. Is she serious or just playing politics? Veterans speak out after bombshell press conference. Melissa's name was trending. So was James Mercer's. And then the reaction started pouring in. Veterans from all over the country flooded comment sections and news segments with their own stories. Some were furious. They agreed with Mercer, saying politicians only cared when cameras were watching. They felt used, ignored, and forgotten. But others felt something they hadn't in a long time: hope. Talk shows spent hours debating what had happened. Was Bondi truly trying to change things? Or was this just another well-planned political stunt? Experts analyzed her every move, discussing whether she was brave for stepping in or if she was just looking for attention. But James Mercer didn't care about what the TV analysts had to say. He was too busy answering phone calls. Somehow his number had gotten out. It wasn't completely leaked, but veterans across the country were finding ways to reach him. The voicemail started piling up. One old man left a message, his voice rough with age. "You don't know me, but I saw you stand up today. I just wanted to say thank you." Another voicemail came in an hour later. "My brother killed himself last year while waiting for the VA to call him back. I wish he had seen this before he gave up." Mercer's jaw tightened. The calls didn't stop, and neither did Bondi. For the next 48 hours she was on the phone nonstop. She called VA offices, congressional contacts, anyone with power to cut through the mess. Her staff was overwhelmed. They hadn't expected so much attention, both positive and negative. Then late at night, Bondi's phone rang. It was an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her pick up. A deep, serious voice came through the line. "This is Director Mason." Bondi sat up straighter. "Glad to hear from you, Director." Mason sighed. "You put me in a tough position today." Bondi leaned back in her chair. "No, I didn't. Your office did that when they lost Melissa Grant's case." There was silence. Then Mason finally spoke. "We're reopening her case immediately." Bondi's grip tightened on her phone. "And the others?" Mason sighed again. "That's complicated. We have thousands of appeals waiting. I can't just push them all through overnight." Bondi exhaled slowly. "Then let's start by reviewing them." A real review. Another long silence. Then Mason said something that surprised her. "I don't disagree with you. The system is broken. But I don't run the whole thing. If you really want to fix this, you need to take the fight higher." Bondi's pulse quickened. "How high?" Mason's next words made her sit up straight. "Take this to Congress." Bondi sat in her office, staring at the bright lights of Tampa through the window. Mason's words echoed in her mind. Take this to Congress. She hadn't expected that. Calling out a VA office was one thing. Holding a press conference was another. But Congress? That was a whole different battlefield. She let out a slow breath and glanced at the notepad on her desk, the same one James Mercer had scribbled names into. It was full of veterans' names, each with a story like Melissa's. Was this really just another political moment? Was she getting in over her head? Her phone buzzed. A text from Mercer. "James Mercer, just saw the news. If you're serious about this, I'll stand with you. But you better not back out." Bondi stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back, "Pam Bondi, I don't back out." The next morning, Bondi arranged a private meeting at a local veterans center. No cameras. No reporters. Just her, Mercer, Melissa, and a handful of veterans who had reached out. Melissa crossed her arms, still overwhelmed by everything. "Do you really think you can get Congress to care about this?" Bondi leaned forward. "I don't know. But if we don't force the conversation, no one else will." Mercer gave a short nod. "All right then. Where do we start?" Bondi thought for a moment. "We build momentum. Public pressure is the only thing politicians can't ignore. We gather more cases, put faces to the names, and demand a congressional hearing." An older man in the back scoffed. He looked about 70. "You don't think people have tried that before?" Bondi met his eyes. "Not like this." He studied her for a long moment. Then he leaned back. "Fine. But if you drop the ball, you'll be just another politician who used us for a headline." Bondi didn't flinch. "Then let's make sure I don't." A week later, the pressure reached Washington. The footage of the press conference had gone viral. Veteran organizations were speaking out. And then a senator from Florida, one Bondi had worked with before, made an announcement. A formal congressional hearing would be held to investigate the VA. Bondi sat in her office, staring at the headline on her laptop. She had wanted change. Now she had a real shot at it. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Mercer. "James Mercer, this is bigger than I thought. But we're in this now." Bondi smirked slightly, shaking her head as she replied. "Pam Bondi, yes, we are." A month later, Bondi was in Washington, preparing to testify before Congress. She still had the same notepad with her. But this time it wasn't just names. It was proof, stories, documents, facts. As she walked toward the chamber, Melissa caught up with her. "Are you nervous?" Melissa asked. Bondi looked at her, then ahead. "No, because this isn't about me." She stepped inside the room, and the fight for real change began. Politics is full of big moments. Some are real, some are fake. But sometimes something happens that makes people stop and pay attention. Pam Bondi may have started this as just a press conference, but now it has turned into something much bigger. Was she a hero? Or just another politician looking for attention? That was for the world to decide. But one thing was certain, this conversation had started, and there was no turning back. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more exciting stories filled with adventure, mystery, and unforgettable moments. Your support means the world. It keeps these stories coming and the creativity flowing. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.